Welcome to the Faith and Feelings podcast. My name is Taylor Joy, and I'm passionate about helping you untangle and honor your emotions, authentically practice your faith, and integrate both into your everyday life so that you can experience the goodness and delight that comes from living in relationship with yourself, God, and others. Thank you for joining me. Let's get started. What happens when the circumstances of life force you to grow up too quickly and shoulder a weight of responsibility or caretaking far beyond your developmental age? When our bodies carry the story of an interrupted adolescence into adulthood, how can this kind of trauma impact us? And how do we begin to heal? In this conversation, my friend Jonathan shares a recent experience of dysregulation, a chest tightening, drowning sensation when too many people around him needed too many things. Together, we process how this everyday moment with his family strikingly paralleled some of his childhood experiences, and he names the longing inside so many of us with similar stories. Can someone just take care of me? As always, if you enjoy this conversation, I'd be so grateful if you took a minute to rate and review the podcast. This is an easy way to partner with me and is invaluable in reaching new listeners. So let's go now to my conversation with Jonathan. Well, welcome to Faith and Feelings, Jonathan. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, it is so much fun to be here. It's nice to meet you face to face.
I know. I was thinking about it earlier today, and this is the first time we've ever actually met.
Yeah, that is crazy because we've read each other's stuff for a while now.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever told you this before, but I remember reading your writing in high school.
What?
And learning so much from how you put words to what it looks like to process grief, loss, and all the complexities of missionary life.
Wow. Well, thank you for making me feel old. I appreciate that. And I think I remember seeing your stuff and then being like, who's this 13-year-old, 14-year-old?
I know.
Writing a book. I'm really behind. Oh my goodness.
Oh, that's funny.
So, yeah.
Yeah, my processing's as a 13-year-old.
Yeah. Was it 13 or 15? What was that?
No, 13. 13.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool.
Yeah. So it's so fun to actually meet and have a real conversation today.
Yeah.
We are in a series on the podcast right now called Why on Earth Did I Do or Say That? And in this series, I'm inviting different guests to share and process a story of when their emotional response to a situation was a 7 or 8 on a scale when it was warranted a 2 or 3. We all have so many moments like this, but we don't often pause and reflect on what's underneath these responses. So, Jonathan, to get started, would you mind sharing a story of when you were emotionally dysregulated?
Yeah. No, I never have 7 or 8. No. Oh man, I love the question. Yeah, sure. So I've been pondering this for a little bit, trying to pick which one I should go with. So just a little setting the stage. I work here, which is in a home office. So kind of a little outbuilding, and then my house is just 15 feet out the door. So I got to go to the bathroom or go home for dinner. It's just walking out the doors, and there's not a whole lot of space before I meet my. It's summertime, so all my kids are home. So I've got four kids, and my wife Elizabeth are home. And so sometimes that's a bit of a rough transition from meeting with missionaries online or having clients that are here. Sometimes those are fun stories. Sometimes, those are hard stories. And there's not much of a buffer between, closing the Zoom call and then walking into the family dinner table. And so a couple of weeks ago, I don't even know what had happened on the work side, but I remember when I walked in to my house, 1 or 2 of my kids had questions for me about something. They're learning to drive. When are we going to go driving? Hey, when is that person coming to fix the foundation? Hey, what about this? And hey, could we do that? And it was just It felt like a lot. And I remember, like, when are we going to go to the store to get that? And my phone's dying. I think I might need a new phone. It was just a whole lot. It was just a whole lot of stuff that was not too much from one person, but there are 5 people over there, and they all kind of had something for me. And I remember feeling so just like mad, like I can't, the emotion that was just happening inside of me was way bigger than I was expecting. It did surprise me for a bit, because I think I just said, I was like, I can't, guys, it's too much. I can't do it all. You guys got to do it yourself. Like, there's some of this you just got to do yourself. Like, I can't. I'm in grad school. I've got a job, and I've got all these other things going on. I don't know. Figure it out. I realized, like we typically do, I realized as the words are coming out that, like, this is a little bit much. This is, I knew even in the doing it that what I was saying, but especially what I was feeling, was a little oversized. It was a little out of proportion to the events, to what my family, the different people in my family were asking me. So that's kind of something from recent my recent life, where I was like, whoa, that was maybe a 7 or an 8, and it could have easily been a 1 or a 2, on the emotional spectrum of intensity.
Yeah. So 2 of the quote unquote oversized emotions that you felt were mad and maybe overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah. It was overwhelmed. It was anger, but anger is too broad of a word. I think it was something like drowning. I think it was something like drowning, where it's like, I cannot do all the things that people are asking me to do right now. And I think in a way it was also, again, this doesn't mean that my family was this, but the feeling was nobody's helping me. And so there was behind or underneath some of that, I think, was this sense of aloneness, or it all depends on me, and I can't hold all of these things. At least I cannot hold all these things right now. Why are you asking me?
Yeah.
That was maybe some of the stuff that was some of the emotions that were under the surface.
That picture of feeling like you were drowning is so powerful. How long do you think you'd been feeling that way? A day, a week, a month, a year, 10 years?
Oh, 10 years or
10 years.
Well, so then as I processed it later, and I think we'll talk about that here in a bit, I did realize that actually the undercurrents of those things were there and have been there for quite some time. I would say in years, and there wasn't anything in particular that was special about that day. Like, I hadn't come from, a really horrible client or a really hard story or anything like that. It was just, the midterms of grad school, and
which are hard.
Yeah,
I can attest.
Yeah. So there's that, right? There's that just kind of forms a bit of the air the water you're swimming in for this season of life, which is not negligible. But it wasn't any 1 or 2 things in particular.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just picturing you walking into your home after work, and everyone is needing something from you. You start feeling overwhelmed and a little angry, along with this feeling like you're drowning. What did you feel about those feelings when you felt them?
Yeah. I feel fine with those. I feel curious about those feelings. I think, I've been doing this type of work where I sit with people in a pastoral counseling role, or in sort of a empathetic coaching role with missionaries overseas, and then and still now. And so my general approach to emotions is allowance and curiosity. Um, and I heard somebody use some ideas, and I put them into an acronym. Maybe they did, um, about giving emotions air, like allowing them, identifying them, and then responding to them.
Hmm.
So giving the emotions air, and so in general, and I think this time I tried to do that. I allowed myself to feel whatever it was I was feeling, and then I did spend some time trying to identify what it was I was actually feeling,
Yeah.
like your question there. And then, okay, how do I want to actually respond? How do I want to choose to respond? Not just react to those emotions or feelings, but how do I want to choose to
Hmm.
respond?
Yeah. Do you think you've always had that posture of curiosity towards emotions, or do you think that's something that's been learned?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it's a little bit of both,
Hmm.
um, because obviously I think that I'm better at it now than I was 10 years ago, which hopefully we would all be able to say
Yeah.
that we're on a journey. We haven't arrived, but as I've learned about emotions and different ways that families approach emotions
Hmm.
with what the Gottmans talk about with emotion coaching and things like that. Um, the family that I grew up in was very much an emotion coaching family
Hmm.
that allowed feelings. Of course, that doesn't mean you allow all behavior. But both of my parents were fairly emotional people, but not out of control emotional people. And so I think I grew up with a lot of allowance for feeling things and getting curious about what those feelings mean or where they're coming from. So
Hmm.
the more clients I've sat with, the more I've realized that is something to be grateful for.
Yeah.
Because it is not always the case. Uh, but that posture of curiosity and allowance for feelings in general, the sort of meta emotion about emotions, has always been, I think, fairly positive and
Hmm.
curious.
Yeah. So, as you continue to process why you got dysregulated with your wife and kids that day, could you pinpoint what was underneath it?
I was able to, and I had a good conversation with my wife afterwards, and actually one of the reasons that this story came up from your question was that it was a bit of a new revelation to me, actually. Um, and yeah, I don't. You want me to dive into that on what fun that
Yeah,
was?
sure.
Um, yeah. So not a long story, but part of my history involves losing a sister when I was 6 or 7 years old. She was born very ill and died. And then when I was 16, my mom was diagnosed with cancer and got very ill, and then ended up dying within a year of diagnosis. And we were a homeschool family in the Midwest, and I'm the oldest of eight. And my mom was diagnosed with cancer when she was pregnant with my little brother. So that's horrible, of course, and a really big deal. But as the oldest in the family, my dad was a local dentist, and so he obviously had to still run his practice and was still working. He was there as much as he could. I don't fault him for any of this. But my mom was very ill, and there were five babies. Basically, there
Hmm.
were five in diapers during that time because one of my sisters has Down syndrome, so she was developmentally delayed, of course. And then right after her are two sisters who are identical twins, and then two more who were very close in age. So I'm 16, 17 years old, and there are five kids who are like 5 or 6 years and under,
Yeah.
and we're homeschool family, so I'm at home a lot. I'm one of the only ones with a driver's license. So what I was able to actually pinpoint as I processed, like, why do I feel this, was actually, I think, some sort of latent, like, I can't hold all of these things. I can't show up for everybody and do everything all the time. And I don't feel resentment towards my sisters or brother. Or,
Hmm.
they were kids, babies. Obviously, I don't feel resentment towards my parents who are dealing with this, life altering cancer diagnosis. Everyone was just trying to hold on. But as I ponder, like, why do I feel this? I think some of it goes back to sort of losing my teen years and becoming a parent very, very early. And I did the grocery shopping with my sister, who's right next to me. We did the weekly grocery shopping. We took care of a lot of the kids. I helped homeschool one of my other sisters who was school age. I drove my mom to a lot of her chemo and radiation things. If her back is spasming on the way home, and driving through Kansas City and rubbing her back to try to get rid of the muscle, the cancer was in her bones. I mean, that's not normal. And I remember bottle feeding my little brother in the oncology office, like while my mom got her radiation. So that is, lots of people have stories of lots of loss and trauma and stuff, and that's part of mine. And I realized kind of for the first time that some of that, like, that everybody needs something from me. I can't just do my own thing. I am trying to live my life too. I think some of it was related to kind of an interrupted adolescence, and I mean that makes me feel lame, but that was my story.
That totally makes sense.
So.
Yeah. When you think about that moment that happened a few weeks ago, I'm curious to know what was happening in your body. Do you think it was similar to what you felt as a kid?
I haven't thought about that. The first part of your question is easy to answer. Excuse me. And that would be, chest tightness primarily. The sense of being over-caffeinated. I don't think I was over-caffeinated, but the feeling of being over-caffeinated, where the body, the nervous system, is fairly ramped up and pressured. So like pressure in my chest and that sense of frustration in your bones, kind of irritation, frustration in your bones, not really having a specific target for that. It wasn't one person in my family that I was feeling that towards. It was everything.
Yeah.
And if I try to drop back and go back to that season of life as a 16, 17, 18-year-old, before I moved out, went to college, I think that I did have that. I don't think that I expressed that. I don't think that I had people around me who were very supportive, but I don't think I had the emotional awareness to know that this is what's going on. I think I was the oldest child. It was me and then a bunch of girls and then my brother who was an infant. I was like, there's the yard to be mowed and there's the stuff to get done.
Yeah.
I wrote checks. I was on my parents' checking account because I didn't pay all the bills from home, but I would run out and do errands and write checks for the family, and that's not the typical 17-year-old kind of story.
Yeah, so much responsibility.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons that I didn't recognize some of what I'm talking about now is because it wasn't traumatic in the sense of somebody did something bad. And it wasn't traumatic in like car accident traumatic. Of course it's traumatic. Any child or teenager losing a parent is traumatic. I know that now. But it is not an obvious sort of like, whoa, this is perhaps going to leave a mark on a body or on a brain. I know that more now. So, but I do think that the fact that it wasn't those real big obvious things actually maybe blinded me in a way, because it was like, well, it was really hard. But yeah, what else are you going to do? Of course, you would never say that to a client or anything now. I know that now, but I think that's kind of a coping strategy for when you're in it.
Even right now, as you share those stories of growing up with all that responsibility so young, what are you feeling in your body right now as you talk about those memories?
Yeah. I mean, this is decaf coffee that I'm drinking here, but I can tell as I tell this story, yeah, that pressure, that stuff comes back. And I can feel myself coming down off of that. having told the story, but there are emotional peaks and valleys, even in the story, and I do feel those as I say it, and our listeners could probably, if they rewind, they could probably hear it in my voice. I I've felt it. And I'm not ashamed of that. I think that's how our bodies work, right? That's how our brain and our bodies work.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I live in that, but I can go back there pretty quick.
Yeah. So fast forwarding to what happened a few weeks ago, what do you think you most wanted in that moment?
Well, I most wanted somebody to take care of me.
Mm-hmm.
I think is what I most wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a 43-year-old guy, but I told my wife this later, and she's very supportive. She just didn't know. She doesn't know what was going on. But I told her, like, I just want somebody to take care of me.
Yeah.
To handle the things. And I even told her, I was like, if there's an errand that needs to be run, and typically I do it, I was like, but she can. Like, if you could just do that, like that would feel, really big to me. And I have one son who can drive. I'm like, he has a part-time job this summer. I've got a full-time job in grad school. So like, if somebody could take care of me, that would be fantastic. That was kind of where we went with that.
Mm.
What I needed the most, though, and I mean, not to be too dramatic, but when you go back to it, what I needed the most was a parent. In that moment, what I wanted the most was a parent who could just come in and say, I got this. You don't have to worry. Just relax.
Yeah. Even if you might not have been able to verbalize this as a kid, do you think you might have had that same desire then as well? Will someone take care of me?
Yeah, I don't know how. Yeah, this is all mysterious, right? It's just all mysterious, and I have snapshots of, we had 3 in a high chair at a time, the twins and my sister and I just picture that, and there's just so much logistical stuff that has to happen with one little kid.
Yeah.
There's with a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, there's a lot of logistical stuff that has to happen. But with 3 in a high chair and then 2 others who aren't in high chairs yet, there's a lot. And I do know. I mean, I do know that on the inside, all of us are little kiddos wanting to be loved, and that is a truth, and I'm okay with that. So yeah, and I think it's balanced for me with a lot of pride in the fact that our family did show up. We did pull together, and our church was very supportive, and even I did show up. I was there. I did what I could. I did what was asked of me. But then I think sometimes there is still that feeling like I'm not sure if I ever put that mantle down. You know what I mean? Like Richard Rohr talks about the soldiers coming home. Is there a way to say thank you for your service, now enter into a different season, enter into rest? And that's an ongoing processing for me. And I think seasons of life you feel that more than others. But
when you think about yourself as a little boy and some of those stories that you talked about, writing the check, feeding your siblings, all the chaos, what do you wish you could go back and tell him?
Yeah, I think I would say, dude, well done.
Yeah.
Like that's hard stuff, and you're showing up. Like, absolutely well done. And I was not in a culture, and I mean, this is the early 90s, mid 90s, so therapeutic culture in Christian circles was even less than it is now. But knowing what I know now, I would go back to that 16, 17-year-old boy, and I was like, dude, you are rocking it. Like, well done. Also, get thyself to a therapist. I think I would say that. some place where I could be, where I didn't have to take care of anybody. I could just say whatever I needed to say. I wouldn't have to worry about offending a therapist. I wouldn't have to worry about managing the therapist. I wouldn't have to worry about the agenda of therapy.
Yeah.
You know, and connecting the dots even here, I know that I tell clients all the time, hey, especially when I'm meeting with missionaries, I don't care about your job. I don't care about whether you stay in this country or don't. Obviously, I care about that stuff, but like, I don't really. Well, how are you doing? What is your story? How are you? And I think that it it would have been really nice to have somebody trained who could have talked to me then. But I didn't know that I needed it, and maybe nobody else did either. But that's what I would tell that kid.
Yeah. Well
Good
done.
job. No, go
And
get
see a
some
therapist.
yeah.
Yeah. When you think about God sitting beside you
Mm,
in the hospital
mm,
as you're feeding your sister,
mm.
what do you think he would have wanted you to know?
Yeah. So if my siblings ever listen to this, is my little brother that was in the oncology office at
Yeah.
sister. So I'll just clarify that. But and I don't know. I I feel like fairly simply, I can imagine God sitting next to me in the oncology office, sort of as I'm holding my little brother, bottle feeding him, God just kind of sitting next to me with his arm around me, like, hey, I got you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what he does. That's what he wants to do.
Yeah. God caring for you as you are caring for your little brother.
Absolutely. It's not I don't think that he would have rescued me from that. I don't think that's his job always to rescue us from those moments. But he is with us in them. And that's a beautiful picture. That's a beautiful picture. Because I don't have a lot of memories from those years, because that's just the chaos. The brain doesn't always remember. But I do have snapshots. And that oncologist office is a snapshot that I have very strongly. And I think one of the reasons is so many of the other patients and staff, my brother and I we were an item in the waiting room, because this wasn't a pediatric oncology unit. It was an oncology unit. And so there were not a lot of, and my brother was like 2 months old.
Wow.
I mean, little. She started chemo and radiation like a month after he was born. So yeah, he was probably even between a month and 2 months old. So some of those scenes stick. It's a beautiful thing to imagine, and to believe that God the Father is there too.
This has been so good. Thank you for everything that you've shared today. But as a final question, I would love to know what you've been learning about staying emotionally grounded in hard spaces.
I have been learning about myself that I definitely have to have the space to process some of this stuff. I'm a pretty quick processor, and I can process in real time, and that's helpful with clients and stuff to be able to process in real time heavy things. But I have to have space for me. And one of the things that I think I'm continually learning is that for me to process that stuff, I have to be away from every person, even the people I love, because I'm on the nearly too high empathetic.
Yeah.
Where you just kind of feel the feelings of the people around you, even if you don't want to.
Yeah.
And I think it's a superpower in the counseling room, but it's also a liability if it's not sort of corralled or controlled. And so for me, in order to do some of that processing of emotions, I have to get away from all people for a period of time. And that's been really nice. And I think finding a couple of guys that understand both of my world has been huge. So I have a couple of guys that I meet with regularly who understand the ministry world. They have been pastors. One of them still is a pastor at a church in a town close by, and they're trained therapists. So they understand the counseling therapy world. And those guys, I can just have conversations with them because they understand missions, or they understand local church ministry and the ins and outs of that, the beauty of that, and also some of the messiness of that. But they also understand the therapeutic modalities, and we can talk on all of those levels, and I can talk with them honestly. I don't have to try to filter my words, or it's not dumbing it down, but I don't have to use colloquial language. We can talk about the words that we both know in both of those spheres. That has been huge for me in my own sort of continued emotional health. Even my current supervisor at the counseling center that I work at now has been a therapist for 30, 40 years, and is a professor at a Bible college, and so definitely understands a ministry, and works as a pastor at his church. So it's those guys have just been a godsend for me.
Yeah. I love what you said, finding time to be alone and finding time to be together with safe relationships, and how that has been really helpful in staying emotionally grounded and regulated. Yeah,
it does. That pays dividends. And I mean, even after my last the story that I told you here from a couple weeks ago, in my head, I was even before you and I talked, I was like, I got to tell my friend that. We meet once a month, and it's like, I need to tell him that story, because that's not necessarily a story you put on Facebook. I mean, I guess I'm sharing it in a podcast now. Merry Christmas, everyone. But that's not one that you're like, oh yeah, that'll go viral on Instagram. It's just not. But it does come to mind, like, I'm going to file that away, and I'm definitely going to tell my friend that when we meet in a couple weeks. So, alone and together. And I think I used to feel a little bit more guilty about having alone time. I'm a dad, I have 4 kiddos, and all this kind of stuff. And now, I definitely am going to have some alone time. Sometimes that's going to be a little overnight trip, or sometimes it's going to be a couple extra hours here in my office before I walk the distance home.
The 15 feet.
I'm not going to feel guilty about that at all.
Yeah. It's so good. This has been so good. Thank you so much for this conversation, Jonathan. I'm really grateful for this time together today.
Yeah, you're welcome. It is really fun to visit with you. And you've got that counselor-ish, well, you have the counselor's motif going on as well, but also we have shared a similar world. And so I appreciate your questions, and how even your questions kind of help me think through and process some of that. And I'm excited for this series that you're doing. I hope that it's an encouragement and a blessing for our listeners.
Thank you. Growing up too soon requires a deep inner strength, but we don't often talk about how this strength, formed out of necessity, can linger into adulthood and fuel a belief that we must always be strong. I keep thinking about those words Jonathan said when he reflected on this experience in his own life. I'm not sure if I ever put that mantle down. The image he described of a soldier coming home from battle has stayed with me, along with those words he wished he could tell his younger self. Thank you for your service. It's time for a different season, for rest. If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to read more from Jonathan, be sure to check out his newest book, which I've linked in the show notes. Until next week. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on Instagram at TaylorJoy. If this conversation was helpful and you'd like more information about my other offerings to engage your story more deeply, check out my website, taylorjoymurray.co.